So how many of you like to give back? And how many of you would like to live a life that has a lot of meaning and personal fulfillment? And how many of you have looked outside your car window or your home or walking down the street and thought, hey, look at that problem over there. Somebody should do something about that. Anybody? Yeah? So I'm going to tell you about my friend Tony Maloney. So in 2001, Tony was living in New York. She was managing her marketing firm, her own firm, living the life. She was mid-career. And on September 11th, on 9/11, she was as shocked as everybody and devastated as everybody as what had happened on 9/11. And Tony said, what can I do to prevent something like this from ever happening again? And then she said, well, what could I do? You know, I don't know anything about peace building. I don't know anything about preventing violence from happening. What do I know? I'm just a businesswoman. So Tony did something very interesting and very, very important. She started with what she knew. And she asked the question again, what could I do to prevent something like 9/11 ever happening again? And so she started with business, with what she knew, business. And she started it to look at what role could business have in peace building? And again, she told herself, well, what do I know? I don't know anything about peace building. But slowly, she moved forward with this question in her mind and this idea of how could business play a role in peace building. So fast forward 15 years, I'm not going to tell you the whole story. If you want to read more of Tony's story, you can actually get that through my app. So fast forward 15 years. In 2002, she founded an organization called B-Peace, or Business Council for Peace. And B-Peace has created to date something like jobs that impact about 21,000 people and put about $80 million into the economies of countries that are affected by violence, like Afghanistan, like El Salvador, and like they just started a program in Lebanon working with refugees from Syria. So Tony, back in 2001 on 9/11, or the week after 9/11, was asking herself this question. Never in a million years did she think 15 years later that this would be her legacy. It's a pretty powerful story, don't you think? So I work with, as Kim mentioned, I work with women who are at a reflection point in their careers and their lives. And they're thinking, what can I do in my next act to give back? What can I do to create change in my community? What can I do about that problem that I see that I feel like somebody should do something about, but I don't really know what to do. I don't know what to do about it, but somebody should do something about that problem. And how can I go beyond simply giving to charity or simply volunteering my time to create change in the lives of others, in my community or in the world? And community is defined in so many different ways, right? So through my Changemaker program, I help women go from having that idea of wanting to give back, of wanting their next act to have more personal meaning, more personal fulfillment. And I help them put action behind their ideas in order to have the impact that they want to have in the world. And my clients do things. I'll give you some examples of my clients in a minute, but they start organizations, they start community projects, they incorporate give back initiatives into their existing businesses, and I'll give you an example of that in a little bit. And I have to say, I mean, I like to brag about my clients, I'm sure you do too, but they're amazing. They're amazing people, and they're just ordinary people who've decided that they're going to step up and do something. Sometimes the things are really big, and sometimes the things are pretty small. And I love my work so much, and I love this idea of how do you use your next act to give back, that I'm writing a book about it, which will be out in the next couple of months. So my promise to you today is what you'll learn today will help you live a legacy that will not only transform your life, but it'll also transform your community, or have the potential to at least. Everybody with me so far? Okay. Let me tell you a little bit how I got into this work. So I spent 20 years in the nonprofit sector. I worked all over the world. I managed and started programs in about 10 different countries, although I've traveled to about 50 different countries. I have raised $20 million for organizations and causes, and have worked with a lot of women and girls, including women in Afghanistan in the upper picture. And this is, Paul recognizes this picture probably because we were in Bangladesh together when we took this picture with a woman who, actually this woman was the boss in her community. She was a powerhouse. Do you remember her? She's pretty amazing. And I got to a point where I loved the work that I was doing. I was really blessed and really lucky and really grateful to be able to do the work that I was doing. But there was something missing. And I remember specifically this day, I was standing on a dirt road in Bangladesh, and we were doing some work filming people who had were benefiting from the organization I was working for. And I was standing there and I was thinking, this is cool, this is great, I love this, but something's missing, like what's missing? And I was thinking more about that night, and we had a lot of long car rides on that trip. And I was thinking, here's what's missing. I'm spending all my time furthering somebody else's idea. And I'm spending all my time using my voice, my strong voice, to speak somebody else's words. And that's fine. I mean, that was good. I was really doing good work. But that's not what I wanted for myself. And when I graduated college, I knew that I was going to go out and do all these great things, and I was going to start my own organization, and I was going to accomplish all these things. And here I was, 45, 46, not having done that, and still standing behind somebody else and promoting their voice. Do good work, but promoting their voice. So long story short, I decided to do something about it. And I started to look around and think about, what could I do? What could I do that would be really fulfilling to me, really meaningful to me, but also fulfill my desire to do good in the world? And my focus has always been on women and girls, and promoting women and girls. And so I thought, well, what could I do to help women become stronger in their community, more leaders in their community, leaders in the United States, leaders everywhere. And so I started to look around, and I looked at programs that were for people who were designed to help people become change makers in their communities. Does everybody know what that means when I say that word? Becoming a change maker, okay. And what I found was that all the programs were for people who were millennials, college age. So basically what was happening, right, what I recognized was that we were asking the millennials and the college-aged kids to change the world, to work on changing the world. But here we were, women in our 40s and 50s and 60s, with all these skills and experience, and nobody cared if we were trying to change the world. But yet there were all these women out there that were trying to change the world. I think a lot of you have seen what has happened since the election in 2016. A lot of people have stepped up, started new organizations, run for office, all this stuff, this wonderful stuff is going on. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of support for those women. And so seeing that, some people were getting the support they needed to become change makers in the community, but people like me were not getting that support. I was like, that's bullshit. And I decided to start an organization and a program that would help women who are at that reflection point in their careers where they're asking what they can do, how they can give back, how they can step up, how they can go from giving charity to creating change, and help them do that. Because I've been starting and managing programs all over the world for 20 years, so I know how to help people take their idea out of their heads, off the paper, and move it forward to create change in people's lives. Okay, so now I'm going to stop talking for a minute because if not, I'm going to lose my voice. And what I want to do is, can I ask you guys a favor to help me out with something? Yeah? So I thought we would see what we can do together to change the world. What do you think? Want to do that? Okay. So what I want you to do, I'm going to give you all a peacock. No, I'm going to give you all a magic wand. I'm giving you all a magic wand. And with that magic wand, you can change anything in your community. Or define community however you want. It can be community, it can be the world, it can be the neighborhood, it can be this conference room if you want. And so what I want you to do, I put markers and paper stickies. I want you not to think too much about it. Like, I know there's probably 100 things that you'd like to change. But pick one thing, and I want you to write it down. And then if you're willing to share, I want to create a legacy wall. So let's create a legacy wall over here. So when you're done, just go ahead and stick it on the wall. And just one thing. Yeah, just pick one thing. Yeah, and it could be something that you want to change in your community. It could be something you want to make better. And again, it can be the community, it can be the world, it could be whatever, your school. So I'm going to read these in a minute because I think this is pretty cool. But I just want to tell you my experience, and I speak in front of a lot of groups, and my experience is that every time I start talking about this, whether it's a small group or a large group, people come up to me afterwards and they're just like, thank you for talking about this, and please come speak to our group because we were just talking about this. We formed this thing in our community, this group in our community, and we're asking the same question. We're asking, where are all the resources for the women that have these great ideas? Anyway, I just wanted to share that with you. So let's see what we have here. Cure mental illness. Make legal representation more accessible. Less hate in the world. Sexual harassment in the workplace. I'm assuming you want less sexual harassment.
Yeah, I guess I should have.
Just to be clear. Okay.
She says less, I say more.
It's different when you're working from home.
Yeah. Yes. Mine would be less dog snoring in my office.
Less dogs running around?
Snore. My dog snores loudly, and I'll be on a conference call, and she'll be like, dude, shut up. Feed everyone who's hungry, starving, starting in New Jersey. More women decision makers in politics. Get more families to attend religious services with kids and instill values at home. Affordable housing.
I can tell you what it says because my handwriting's terrible.
Okay.
End misogyny and increase equality and love, and I can't even remember the other word I put on there. But
Healing.
healing. There you go. She can read my writing.
And then the court system to be better families during divorce.
There's one there. Make kids.
Did I miss one? Make kids, youth happier, and bullying and suicide. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So there's a lot of power on that wall. Does anybody else recognize that? What if we even took one of those ideas and did something with it? Can you imagine the change we could create? So let me tell you about I have a new client, so Teresa. She's really cool. So Teresa, actually, to the point of, there's one up here, less hate in the world. So Teresa is starting something called the Museum of the Courageous. And she doesn't know exactly what it's going to look like yet. She doesn't know if it's going to be a traveling museum or if it's going to sit somewhere. She's not sure. But the Museum of the Courageous is going to document the stories of people who have stood up to hate, who has stood up to hate crimes and show those stories to the world, right? Because we don't always hear about them. And this is what Teresa says to me. And she's it's funny because she's one of those clients, when I first talked to her, I thought I was interviewing her for my book and she was going to give me all this information. And then I realized that she really needed help. And I was just so impressed. I was like, this woman's amazing and she needs my help. This is awesome. But anyway, so she wants to create this thing called the Museum of the Courageous. But the problem is she's in a job that she likes, but a job that she's ready to leave. And she's been there for a while, and she's kind of a fixture in this organization, and she's having a hard time extracting herself from this organization. Basically, they don't want to let her go. But she's also afraid, right? And so this is her quote to me. So she has an intense fear of moving on. You know, she's afraid of the unknown. She's afraid of what could happen. She's afraid of burning bridges. But she also wants to make sure that this idea for the Museum of the Courageous and her other ideas come out and are heard, and that she creates her legacy around this museum and around her ideas. So here she is. It's kind of a clash. I just went to see it. Did anybody see this superhero movie that's out? No. Yeah. That one, Infinity Wars. Yeah, and they're all always crashing against each other. And so, I mean, that's kind of like what it's like for her right now. But what's the problem? So if she doesn't do this Museum of the Courageous, or why is it so important she does something like that? Because there's a high school kid that's going to come through that exhibit someday and see those stories of those people who have stood up to hate and realize, I could do that. And so the next time he or she is in that circumstance, in that situation, or a situation like that, they'll have a story to pull on. So you know, the Museum of the Courageous is a pretty small thing. This isn't necessarily the Smithsonian, right? It's something pretty small, pretty manageable. Is something that she can do. So what about these ideas over here, right? How do you put action behind these ideas? I love this quote. Everyone who's ever taken a shower has an idea, and it's the person who gets out of the shower, dries off, and does something about it who makes a difference, right? The problem is that most people dry off, get out of the shower, dry off, and they go make coffee. And that idea sits in their brain or sits in their notebook, and they don't ever do anything with it. And what happens? The problems in our communities get worse. There's more school violence. The environment is affected in greater ways. I mean, pick your issue, right? Bullying. We've got bullying here. And people continue to wonder, what could I do? You know, what would happen if I stood up and actually did something about the problem? One of these problems that you put over here. And so I want you to ask yourself this question. If you implemented, if you took small steps to push one of those problems forward, could you change one person's life? Because that's really what it begins with, one person's life. Don't think about whether you're going to win the Nobel Prize right away. Hold off on that. Just think about one person's life. So I want you to write this down. Procrastination is the enemy of change. What if Rosa Parks had said, you know, I'm going to go sit in the front of the bus tomorrow or someday. I'm going to sit there someday. Someday never comes. Okay, so now some of you are happily volunteering, happily donating money when you can, and that's great. Like, that's fantastic. We need you to do that. So I'm in no way saying, like, oh, you know, just give all that up and become change makers in the community. This isn't for everybody. And I'm also not saying you need to quit your job and take a vow of poverty or something to become a change maker in your community. There's an example of a woman that I worked with a while back she was a photographer. And she went, she was very disturbed about the ideas that people had of refugees in her community and the discrimination against refugees in her community. And so what she did was she went and got to know some of the refugees and did this photography project around the refugees and with the refugees. And then she went around to all the churches and all the community centers in the area and did like a presentation, a roadshow with her photography, and talked about the lives of the refugees and introduced two communities that weren't connecting with each other in any way. And she still worked full time. That was her passion project. It was by no means something that she quit her job or came out of retirement to do. It was her passion project. And also, I think I mentioned this before, you can incorporate a give back activity into your existing business. And I love this example. So these are a couple of my clients, Tammy and Diane. So who was talking about going golfing? It was you, right? So they just started a company called Kinona Sports, and it is golf clothes for women. But more importantly, they are working with women to learn how to golf, to support golf as a way of doing business, so that women are on the golf course when business is happening, when deals are happening, when conversations are happening. And they're also working with girls to get girls involved in the game of golf from the beginning, from an early age. And so I'm working with them. They are entrepreneurs, hardcore entrepreneurs. You know, they're not about starting a nonprofit or anything like that. But they want the third leg of their business, like a three-legged stool. They want the third leg of their business to be something that's giving back to the community. And so that's what I'm working with them on, figuring out what that give back activity is for them. And you know, they started out, when they approached me, they wanted to collect old golf clothes and give them away. And I was like, that's just not a good idea. Let's figure something else out. So, so we're figuring it out. It's free. We just jump on the phone.